We are going to be talking about HRV, acronym for heart rate variability. We touched upon it last time where the physical causes of heart rate variability actually is tied to mental mental and physical well-being. Specifically, it was around the topic of resilience. And I think this is actually pretty interesting because, I think from a high level, just by the word itself, we can kind of assume what heart rate we know what heart rate means, and we know what variability means. So you can kind of guess what that means. But what's interesting is that I've always associated heart rate variability with it starting from the brain and then transferring itself to the body. So if I'm in a stressful situation, adrenaline will pump through my body, and then your heart rate would just go up as opposed to the other way around. So we're going to talk about that today. Do you want to start us off, Banu, by telling us how that could or could not be right, and then how we would flip that understanding on its head?
Yeah. So that's interesting what you're saying. Yes, we always assume there's a connection between brain and the heart, and we assume that the relationship is more from the brain to the heart, right? Mm-hmm. But it's actually kind of opposite. There are neurons in our heart that are identical to our brain. But 90% of those neurons that are located in our heart goes from the heart, carrying information to the brain. So the 90% of the neurons in our heart is actually communicating to the brain, not receiving communication from the brain.
Interesting. And what would those be? Because the thing I would think about is just blood. So blood from our heart goes to our brain, and that would make sense. And what they would transfer is kind of like...
We're talking about neurons, nerve cells, right? Okay. The nervous system, that's part of the nervous system that is located in your heart. So you have neurons not only in your brain, but also in your heart. Smaller number, but you have a heart intelligence in that sense. Part of your nervous system is located in your heart, and it carries information to the brain about what's happening, and it's really fast. So last time we were talking about the resilience, and part of what determines our resilience is our body's ability to bounce back after responding to challenges properly in a physical way, and then going back to the baseline when that threat has gone away. Right? In a physically resilient nervous system, we expect the body going back to its baseline quickly and efficiently. But when the resilience is low, it means that the body cannot go back to its baseline. It takes longer, or it may not be happening effectively. So when we look at the nervous system and the response to threats, heart is important. Why? Because if there's a threat in the environment and you're responding to it, we get mobilized, right? We, as hunter-gatherers, the way we evolved is where the threats were physical in nature. They were all survival threats. Means like I need to stay alive, and to stay alive, I need to either fight that source of threat or run away from it. So, and that mobilization is a physical response. I need to physically run away or physically fight. And to make that happen, heart needs to beat faster and create that mobilization. That's why our heart rate increases when we are,
I see. So it kind of prepares us for battle. That's what happens.
Yes, it prepares us. It can be threat fighting, or sometimes excitement can do the same thing, because excitement also has a survival value, is making us go towards something that is going to help us to survive. Those are like, we're excited for good things, and that excitement can mobilize for good things. It's not only at the times of threat, but our heart helps us to mobilize our whole body for a physical output. Mm-hmm. So the way it responds to challenges are very important in our survival capacity, right? A heart that is responsive, or a nervous system that is responsive, will react to threats and challenges again, and the lack of threats. So, and if it's responding to the environment properly, we will see a higher variation between heartbeats. That means our heart is responding to the environment. And as the environment's changing, as what we are doing, the activity we are doing is changing, heart is responding to that. It's a responsive nervous system.
Yeah.
Right. So HRV, heart rate variability, is a very important biomarker because it is an indicator of our physical and psychological well-being. Yeah, together. When you look at the correlations of low heart rate variability and health outcomes, you see it being very strongly correlated with death from coronary diseases, cancer, diabetes, and like multiple other also like health problems that you may experience, inflammation. But we also see it associated with depression, mood disorders. Also, even like people going through burnout, we see like the HRV being lowered. So basically, our HRV is an indicator how well our nervous system is doing, and our nervous system regulates our physical well-being and our psychological well-being.
Right.
They depend on the nervous system, right? So because of that, I think in terms of understanding our body's ability to respond effectively is very important, because it is something we can change. Right, we can improve our heart rate variables. There are certain ways to do that, and it's very important to know where we are and do the things to improve it if we are laying on the lower side.
So before we get to that, why is having a higher or variable heart rate bad for us?
It means that our nervous system is not responding to the environment effectively. And it means that our body's ability to deal with stressors, physical or emotional stressors, are very low.
Like, for example, like if you're in fight or flight mode, or sometimes when I'm stressed, like the amount of focus that I have it helps. Wouldn't I want to be in that state all the time?
Stress is fine.
Okay.
Stress is low HRV are not the same thing. Yeah, you need to go through stress sometimes, and some level of stress can improve the performance, right? Stress is okay, and it's adaptive. It is required for survival. In itself, stress is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Chronic stress is a bad thing, meaning that there isn't always stress response. Stress response should be, okay, something happens, I give stress response, but I go back to my baseline, then I'm not giving that stress response. It should be like an emergency situation or attending to the situation. But if you are always under stress, then you're not using the body the way it was meant to be, right? And it erodes the body's capacity to fix itself, to heal itself, to function optimally, and it starts breaking down your resilience, your ability to tolerate the challenges, your responses to those. So it's that constant and long-term stress that is problematic, not just like occasional stress, which is fine and it's adaptive, it's helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I see.
But HRV is a measure of your body's ability to deal with things. So if you have a low HRV, I would expect even if a small stressor can break you at that moment. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you have a higher HRV, a higher stress level, you can handle higher stressful situations physically and otherwise. And because of that, athletes use it, for example, to understand when to push for training and when to recover. It's physical stress, right? When you put your body through intensive training. So, and they measure it every day so that they can understand when it is okay to push your body further and when you need to recover. Because if you're measuring it daily and it's at a certain level and then you see dropping one day, it means that your body is not going to be able to handle a training that way on a regular level. So it means that you need to recover. And athletes know very well, like recovery is a very important part of performance. Performance. You cannot, like with the muscle performance, right? You cannot go and train the same muscle every day. You need to train it and let it recover. And during that recovery phase, actually, it creates that growth and performance. And I think it's similar for knowledge workers from a cognitive perspective, in the sense that like you overstretch yourself, you sprint at work, and then your HRV drops, indicating that your ability to tolerate that kind of work and the stressor is lessened, which means it's time to recover. It's time to take it easy. And it gets low again, you can go at it again. That's sprint time. So monitoring your HRV also gives the ability to understand when is time to sprint, push things harder, and when to take it easy. And it's a way, you know, everybody's HRV gets higher and lower sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's helpful to monitor it, to understand how we should pace ourselves, respecting our cycles and the need of our nervous system. So what the environment demands from us does not match to the demands of environment in our day. Right? And we feel always like we need to respond to demands from the environment. It's it never decreases, always increases. And we forget that we have those cycles that we need to respect of the kind of sprint and recovery. So I think it's a very useful tool to figure that out.
So how do you do that? And what's a good measure of?
Yeah. So nowadays, it's pretty easy to measure your HRV. If you have the new Apple phone, it's already in there through the breathing app. If you wake up in the morning, first time in the morning, you activate that breathing app and you breathe for a minute, it automatically measures your HRV and you can find that value on your health app. Or you can have Fitbit, like other kind of gadgets that you can use on your wrist, or there's like I think chest straps and stuff like that for people who physically train. So you can get one of those things and start measuring your HRV every morning upon waking up. For example, my watch measures it resting HRV throughout the day, but don't look at that data because that data doesn't really give us a clear information on things. What we want to know is, as much as possible at the same time, upon waking up, before you do anything, before you drink coffee, tea, get up, do anything, just in bed, just measure it. So understand the trends of your HRV and understanding your limits. Let's see, first look, if it's very low, it puts you in a risk category. I think then it's important to start a regimen to improve HRV levels if you have a low one. And if you don't have a low, like if you are on the averages, still it's good to monitor it because you want to see those days that it drops, that tells you take it easy physically, emotionally. Right now, your body, your nervous system is not going to be able to handle too much. This is the day to recover. Take it easy, be nice to ourselves, and then it's going to come back up, and then we go and hustle again.
And what are there indicators in terms of knowing when your HRV is just too high on a constant basis? Like it's just, for example, if it goes up because you're sprinting or doing anything physical and it ends up going back down, what's too much? Because I used to train like a few hours a day before this COVID thing. So I train at least like 2 hours a day or more. So my heart rate would go up. What's too much? And then how much?
Different than the heart rate. Again, after 2 hours of training, I would expect your HRV to drop, not increase. Next day it may increase. Like physical exercise increases it, but after an intense workout, it will decrease, letting you know it's time to recover because you just did an intense training. And it's not a bad thing that it happens, but it tells you, okay, if you're not used to doing that level, and if it was intense for your body, it means that now it needs recovery after an intense workout.
Right.
The low levels. So, it's generally high, high HRV is good, but like if you have abnormally high levels, that may be indicator of something else, but I think it's more rare.
Sorry, say that again.
So I'm saying generally high HRV we consider it as a good thing, high heart rate variability levels. But if it's constantly on a unnaturally high place, that may be indicator of something else, but it's not as frequent as the low HRV. Like I get many of my clients, I follow their HRV levels.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
For a report?
I'm sorry?
Yes, for a report from them?
Yeah, they usually keep a script sheet, especially if they are in a stressful situation and I'm worried about the compromised ability, and also teach them how to regulate themselves initially. At the beginning of the relationship, but when I start working with a client, I like to see that and also do the things to improve their heart rate variability, because I think it's crucial for a leader to have a nervous system that is responsive, number one, that recovers easily, and get them into a place of safety and calm so that they can actually give that stake to the, of course, other people and their team, but also make decisions from that place, because your decision-making skills are compromised when your psychophysiological resilience is low. So I think it's crucial for leaders to be monitoring their HRV levels and trying to improve it. Should be something they need to do for good leadership performance.
So give me an example. So give me some examples that you worked with clients where their HRV levels have been high. What was the cause of it? What was the root cause?
High or low?
High. What was the case studies in terms of this is what you saw, this is what caused it, and this is what we did to work with them?
So there can be multiple of issues, things contributing to that. For example, clients who have a consistent and good exercise regimen tend to have a little higher, a little better HRV levels than the others. People who are better at emotion regulation and have practices like meditation and stuff like that, they have higher heart rate variability than others, mostly in my experience. And then there's some variety, but people, especially overworked, tend to have lowered HRVs. They are stretched a little too thin. It lowers the HRV.
Yeah. Okay. So, that's good to know, because I thought higher HRV is not a good thing versus lower HRV.
No, high HRV, we want high variability. It's different than heart rate. You're thinking about heart rate, that confuses.
Right. Okay.
Heart rate variability is the time difference between each heartbeat.
Right. I see.
And the variation, the high means that it varies.
So we want more variation. So it could be above 120s, and then in the 80s, and then back to the hundreds, right, for heart rate. Yeah. So that's variation, right? So we want more variation in our heart rate throughout the day.
Yeah. So your question is, what lowers it?
Right. What lowers the variability? So in other words, you're at some sort of heart rate all day, which could be at a high heart rate or a low heart rate or whatever that is.
No,
so I guess
what about your heart rate? Again, it's the time between heart, it's like a metronome. think about it like a metronome. Tick,
Yes, that's the
tick,
heart rate. Yeah.
tick, tick, right? We want them slightly different. We don't want the exact spacing of the heart rates. It's not about heartbeat, if it's high or low. We're not looking at that. We're
Mhm.
looking at how much time has passed since the last heartbeat.
Right.
We look at if they are exactly the same like a metronome. If it's like a metronome, it's not good.
Right. I see.
We want change in that. So
Yeah.
I think what lowers our heart rate variability is overstretching ourselves in general. Putting our nervous system in situations that it cannot handle. We are putting too much on a nervous system over its ability. We overstretch ourselves. It can be physically, emotionally, cognitively, in every way. And that's, I think, very common in the tech world, in the startup world that I see. So you can lower that, your HRV, by overstretching yourself. Not having good enough emotion regulation can do that as well, because it's also our thinking patterns putting our bodies in that threat mode. It's how we understand the stories we write about the world can change the nervous system functioning and our threat system's response, right? So that's another thing. Like if your stories are very negative and seeing like everything is threat and they go online, if you have lower HRV, you're going to be more prone to do that anyway. But if it's your mental patterns, it's going to put your nervous system under stress for longer periods of time. So that's also something that I see common with people on low HRV, but also physical problems. Inflammation on the body, it can be physically caused as well. If there's inflammation in your body, like these are associations, right? I think existence of inflammation can cause your HRV to be lower, and low HRV can, create a situation where you get inflamed much more easily, responding to the agents that are inflammatory in a way that you're not, taking care of. The body cannot deal with those things. So there can be physical also issues that lowers someone's heart rate variability.
Okay, so let me backtrack my question, which is like, what's an example of a client that you've had where the HRV was low? What was the cause of it, and how did you help them resolve that?
Again, I think causes were a combination of things. I'm not trying to pinpoint the cause of it. What I see that comes with it is that, feeling stressed out constantly, and having low energy, low engagement, being triggered much more easily, being more judgmental about themselves and people, having a short fuse, not being able to recover when they would come from work home, like they could not relax and recover when they're at home and doing other stuff. So these were the type of things that I would see common in clients with low HRV. And what we did was to do the things that improves it. So we would monitor it and make sure that we are improving that, heart rate variability and our physical and psychological resilience.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to get to, have you seen any drastic shifts in HRV like when they've changed the way that they think about themselves, or changed the way that they approach it, or is it kind of like a gradual thing? Because it sounds like it's like many things, is what I'm hearing, right? Many things.
It's like going to the gym. It's not like all of a sudden your HRV becomes completely something different, HRV levels. No, it's like going to the gym. How you go to the gym and train so that your muscles grow. We need to treat our nerves like that as well. So there is a key nerve that is associated with our heart rate variability, which is called the vagus nerve. And vagus nerve is a very important nerve, and it's like, we call it vagal brake. We talked about how heart rate increases when we are dealing with a challenge or a threat. right? And when the threat is gone, to go back to our baseline, we need to lower the heart rate. And vagal brake is doing that. Vagal brake is something that puts the brake on the heart and slows it down. That's a nerve, right? And the condition of that brake is obviously very important in its ability to slow it down or not. So the vagal tone, we refer it as a vagal tone. If you have a good vagal tone, when you press the brake, it stops the car. But if you don't, if the brakes in your car is not working effectively, you press on the brake, what happens? It doesn't stop the car effectively, right? So you need to make sure you have good brakes, and you can tone that nerve through some physiological exercises. Here, I'm not talking about the mental exercise, I'm talking about physical exercises that you do. It's like going to the gym and then getting your vagal tone better. And that's important part of that regimen I use with the clients, to make sure we start with the physical exercises, and then we go to also the emotion regulation exercises afterwards. And the simplest, easiest way to improve your resilience, very easy. You can do it 2 minutes every day and it will drastically improve.
All right. What is that?
Very simple. Long exhale.
Long exhale?
Long exhale. Yes. It's a breathing. I'm not going to even call it technique. I'll explain what it is. So every time you exhale, the vagal brake goes in and slows down the heart rate. Every time you exhale. You inhale, heart rate increases. You exhale, heart rate decreases because the vagal brake is on through exhaling. If I want to think of that vagal brake as a muscle. If you want to improve that muscle, what do you need to do? If you want to grow a muscle, increase the tone.
Well, you basically exercise it. In other words, you damage it.
The more you use it, let's say, the more you use it, the stronger it becomes. Right?
Yep.
The more you use it, the stronger it's going to become. And if every time I exhale, I'm using it, what does that mean? If I keep my exhale longer, I'm going to be exercising it to stay on longer. Therefore, building the tone of it.
Is it a lung exercise? Because as you learn to exhale, you're doing something to your muscle, and that muscle gives you a heart rate response, right?
It's not a muscle, it's a nerve.
It's a nerve to, okay.
Vagus is a nerve. I was just using the analogy of a muscle. So vagus is a nerve, and vagal brake, the tone of that nerve that regulates the slowing down of the heart. And every time we exhale, we are activating that nerve, and the more we exercise it, it gets stronger. Think about it that way. And because of that, we want to exhale longer than we inhale. So let's try it together if you want.
Okay, I'm down.
The way I start is with a ratio of 4-6. That's a good starting point. So you inhale in 4 counts. You go in 1, 2, 3, 4, and you exhale in 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And how empty should your lungs be when you exhale? Because I'm trying to do it at a pace where it's there's a point where it's empty, and I keep on pushing beyond that, right?
You want to pace it out. So pursing your lips
right.
help you to regulate it so that you don't and and it's not an exhale, right?
Right.
You want to stay in the exhale position as long as you can.
Okay.
Right. We usually start with my clients at 4-6 ratio, and then quickly test if they are comfortable to 4-7, then we go to 4-7. If they are comfortable 4-8, then we keep it at 4-8. So we can change the ratio as we get more comfortable with the long exhale.
Mm-hmm.
And usually people keep a practice around 4-8, but for people who are beginning, it may be too much because you don't want to exhale to a level that it stresses your heart. Like if you're out of breath, And if you're coming like this afterwards, means that it's too much for you at that point in time.
Right. Yeah, that's what I meant. Interesting.
Yes, you don't want to go there. That's why I'm like, do 4-6 for a while. If you're comfortable and if you feel like you can comfortably do 4-8, then go to 4-7 and then 4-8, then do that gradually. And if at any time you feel like it's stressing you out, you're gasping for air afterwards and your heart rate increases because of that, then it means that you're overdoing it. It means go back to that ratio you're comfortable with. You should be able to do this comfortably. And you can start doing this just for 2 minutes. And there are studies actually on the decision-making skills using this technique. They did it with a group, 2 minutes of long exhale practice before a decision-making task, business decision-making task. And control group didn't do that practice, they just watched the video. And the group that has done this 2-minute exercise had more correct answers on that decision-making, business decision-making situation. So it improves your decision-making, even just doing it 2 minutes right before it. And this is not like a long practice I'm talking about. So it's very useful to use it during our day to get to a place, like do it 2 minutes so that we increase, we change our state. Then that's the short-term use of it. But I think the long-term perspective on it is do it regularly so that you improve your vagal tone, which is going to be regulating your body, which is going to improve your heart rate variability over time. So I recommend everyone to do it every single day. And for people who doesn't like to sit down and doing breathing exercises, there are other ways of doing it, which I use those formats more for myself. Singing is one of them, because singing forces us to exhale. You inhale and then you need to exhale for a long time, especially if you're singing difficult songs. I sing terribly, but luckily people around me puts up with that. They're okay with that. So yeah, I even I'm even using this app to like do the vocal trainings so that I make sure like I'm doing it. It's more fun for me, and I'm just signing up for a singing online.
Oh, amazing!
Actually, again, I can't sing, but I think for me it's a more fun way of exercising my vagus nerve and improve my heart rate variability. Another way of doing it is playing wind instruments. If anybody wants to pick up a new instrument, I think wind instrument is a great option because it forces your breath. Swimming was for me also something that allowed me to do long exhale when I had the option to do that. Because when you're swimming, you breathe in and you're trying to be efficient with that breath. Right. And if you're not, instead of holding it, if you are releasing slowly, then you can use it like a breathing exercise and exercising your vagus nerve.
Interesting. And then you recommend doing it, I mean, outside these are great alternatives, by the way. But if they want to do it at home and they don't have all these activities, you recommend it in the morning? I think you touched on it. Or when do you recommend doing it?
Morning is usually good. It can be any time. But it's a good time, like you measure your HRV. There's already like a one for when I do it with my Apple Watch, because it's a 1 minute breathing exercise in a way. And after I'm done with it, then I do 2 minutes. Again, 2 minutes is, I think, a good place to start minimum. But for my clients, I do between 10 and 20 minutes. I require them to do it, not 2 minutes. It's a longer. So I'm a little more ambitious. That's why I feel like singing works better for me than sitting 20 minutes sitting. I like singing for 20 minutes rather than sitting and doing it like that. But a lot of my clients enjoy just sitting, doing the breathing practice for 20 minutes. So
that's amazing. Wow. I think I've learned quite a bit today about the the heart rate variability and basically exercises that would.
Yeah, but yeah, I think it's like a very small investment, and it has tremendous benefit to our like physical and psychological well-being. Like you just breathe, you exhale a little longer time for a little, like just do it 2 minutes a day, and I think you're better off. And especially doing it before important conversations, before important decisions, before work. After you finish working, you want to go back socializing. I think just implanting these 2 minutes is very easy, but also like amazing ROI.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a good way to help switch the way you think, because sometimes you're in a mode and just switching your brain is a very tough and exhausting thing to do. Like when I work and I have like 8 hours of meetings, my mind always has to switch to the next meeting, and I am exhausted by the end of it.
Yeah.
I have no more mental capacity to start working on the actual work after just meeting with people every so often. But this, so.
Yeah, this will help your nervous system recover a little bit after that intensive, draining period. And also, before we close, like I want to make the point that to again improve our psychophysiological resilience and heart rate variability, it's important to monitor ourselves and not overstretch and overstrain.
Mm-hmm.
Again, doing the analogy with the physical training, when athletes, if they overstrain a muscle, they make themselves, vulnerable for injuries.
Mm-hmm.
Help their performance drop. On top of it, they are exposed to injuries that is gonna be very problematic for them.
Yeah.
And it is the same thing for a knowledge worker from a performance perspective, but we don't recognize that our cognitive, emotional, mental, social performance is similar to our physical performance. So we need to make sure that we are not putting ourselves in that kind of vulnerable situation by overstretching ourselves, overcommitting ourselves, not recovering enough. And what is the injury that we see around?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everybody's talking burnout. Everybody is injured, but nobody is understanding, like, there's something wrong here, right? Like, if this is so prevalent, obviously there's something wrong. And burnout is also a psychophysiological problem, showing that your nervous system is at a state that cannot respond to it to that level anymore. And it's serious warning signs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, what makes it really tough, and what I think why it's useful in our conversation, is that I think it's often hard for people to gauge and measure. I mean, we're talking about taking care of ourselves, but I mean, it's a very subjective thing, right? But doing this, at least having something to measure against, would help us tremendously. And then just like anything else, we're looking for something that has some sort of guardrails, and then after that, the art comes to kind of understanding yourself, like what is too much, what is not, and what should become part of you, right? But yeah. Right.
Yeah, and I think it's important for us to realize the physiological basis of our cognitive and emotional and social well-being. We assume that what happens in our brain happens in our brain, and then we have physical health and they have nothing to do each other. It's not like that, right? So we are looking at the variation of the time between heart rates, and it tells us our psychological, also emotional resilience levels, so we have those things that monitor, as you're saying. If we have these biomarkers, it allows us to monitor it, and if we can monitor it, we can see what improves it and what makes it worse, and it gives kind of like this guideline.
Right. Makes sense.
Right.
Great. Awesome.
So yeah, and there are other ways to do that as well, but for people here, if they're listening, this is a good way to start.
I definitely think so. Yeah. Well, thank you, Banu. That was incredibly informative. There's some pretty good actionable things we could take away from this. So everybody else out there, your mind and heart are connected. We say that metaphorically, but even physically now we know.
Yeah, exactly. Are you going to start measuring your heart rate variability, Tony?
I will be. Yeah, I'm going to be looking at the apps. I mean, I know how to measure heart rate, but heart rate variability is a big thing. So now that I'm going to look at that, it's difference. And now that I know the difference, it's something I'm going to consider.